a sad and contemptuous smile. "I am sorry, my friend," he said, and his shoulders rose a little to indicate that the misfortune was no fault of his. "It is a pearl of great value," Kino said. The dealer's finger spurned the pearl so that it bounced and rebounded softly from the side of the velvet tray. "You have heard of fool's gold," the dealer said. "This pearl is like fool's gold. It is too large. Who would buy it? There's no market for such things. It is a curiosity only. I am sorry. You thought it was a thing of value, and it is only a curiosity." Now Kino's face was perplexed and worried. It is the pearl of the world," he cried. "No one has ever seen such a pearl." "On the contrary," said the dealer, "it is large and clumsy. It is a curiosity. It has interest. Some museum might perhaps take it to place in a collection of seashells. I can give you, say, 1,000 pesos. Kino's face grew dark and dangerous. "It is worth 50,000, he said. "You know it. You want to cheat me." And the dealer heard a little grumble go through the crowd as they heard its price, and the dealer felt a little tremor of fear. "Don't blame me," he said quickly. "I am only an appraiser. Ask the others. Go to their offices and show your pearl. Or better, let them come here, so that you can see there is no collision. Boy," he called, and when his servant looked through the rear door, "Boy, go to such a one, and such another one, and such a third one. Ask them to step in here, and do not tell them why. Just say that I will be pleased to see them." And his right hand went behind the desk and pulled another coin from his pocket, and the coin rolled back and forth over his knuckles. Kino's neighbors whispered together. They had been afraid of something like this. The pearl was large, but it had a strange color. They had been suspicious of it from the first. And after all, 1,000 pesos was not to be thrown away. It was comparative wealth to a man who was not wealthy. And suppose Kino took 1,000 pesos? Only yesterday he had nothing. But Kino had grown tight and hard. He felt the creeping of fate, the circling of wolves, the hover of vultures. He felt the evil coagulating about him, and he was helpless to protect himself. He heard in his ears the evil music, and on the black velvet the great pearl glistened so that the dealer could not keep his eyes from it. The crowd in the doorway wavered and broke and let the 3 pearl dealers through. The crowd was silent now, fearing to miss a word, to fail to see a gesture or an expression. Kino was silent and watchful. He felt a little tugging at his back, and he turned and looked in Juana's eyes, and when he looked away, he had a renewed strength. The dealers did not glance at one another, nor at the pearl. The man behind the desk said, "I have to put a value on this pearl. The owner here does not think it fair. I will ask you to examine this thing, and make an offer. Notice," he said to Kino, "I have not mentioned what I have offered." The first dealer, dry and stringy, seemed now to see the pearl for the first time. He took it up, rolled it quickly between thumb and forefinger, and then cast it contemptuously back into the tray. "Do not include me in the discussion," he said dryly. "I will make no offer at all. I do not want it. This is not a pearl. It is a monstrosity." His thin lips curled. Now, the second dealer, a little man with a shy, soft voice, took up the pearl, and he examined it carefully. He took a glass from his pocket, inspected it under magnification. Then he laughed softly. "Better pearls are made of paste," he said. "I know these things. This is soft and chalky. It will lose its color and die in a few months. Look." He offered the glass to Kino, showed him how to use it, and Kino, who had never seen a pearl's surface magnified, was shocked at the strange-looking surface. The third dealer took the pearl from Kino's hands. "One of my clients likes such things," he said. "I will offer 500 pesos. And perhaps, I can sell it to my client for 600. Kino reached quickly and snatched the pearl from his hand. He wrapped it up in the deerskin and thrust it inside his shirt. The man behind the desk said, I am a fool, I know, but my first offer stands. I still offer 1,000. What are you doing? He asked, as Kino thrust the pearl out of sight. I am cheated, Kino cried fiercely. My pearl is not for sale here. I will go, perhaps even to the capital. Now the dealers glanced quickly at one another. They knew they had played too hard. They knew they would be disciplined for their failure. And the man at the desk said quickly, I might go to 1,500. But Kino was pushing his way through the crowd. The hum of talk came to him dimly. His rage blood pounded in his ears, and he burst through and strode away. Juana followed, trotting after him. When the evening came, the neighbors in the brush houses sat eating their corn cakes and beans, and they discussed the great theme of the morning. They did not know, it seemed, a fine pearl to them. But they had never seen such a pearl before, and surely the dealers knew more about the value of pearls than they. And mark this, they said. Those dealers did not discuss these things. Each of the three knew the pearl was valueless. But suppose they had arranged it before. If that is so, then all of us have been cheated all of our lives. Perhaps, some argued, perhaps it would have been better if Kino took the 1,500 pesos. That is a great deal of money, more than he had ever seen. Maybe Kino is being a pig-headed fool. Suppose he should really go to the capital and find no buyer for his pearl. He would never live that down. And now, said other fearful ones, now that he had defied them, those buyers will not want to deal with him at all. Maybe Kino has cut off his own head and destroyed himself. And others said, Kino is a brave man and a fierce man. He is right. From his courage, we may all profit. These were proud of Kino. In his house, Kino squatted on his sleeping mat, brooding. He had buried his pearl under a stone of fire hole in his house, and he stared at the woven tools of his sleeping mat until the cross design danced in his head. He had lost one world and had not gained another, and Kino was afraid. Never in his life had he been far from home. He was afraid of strangers and of strange places. He was terrified of that monster of strangeness they called the capital. It lay over the water and through the mountains over 1,000 miles, and every strange, terrible mile was frightening. But Kino had lost his old world, and he must clamber on to a new one. For his dream of the future was real and never to be destroyed. And he had said, I will go. And that made a real thing too. To determine to go and to say it was to be halfway there. Juana reached him while he buried his pearl. She watched him while she cleaned Coyotito and nursed him, and Juana made the corn cakes for supper. Juan Tomas came in and squatted down beside Kino and remained silent for a long time, until at last Kino demanded, What else could I do? They are cheats. Juan Tomas nodded gravely. He was the elder, and Kino looked to him for wisdom. It is hard to know, he said. We do not know what we are cheated from birth to the overchange on our coffins. But we survive. You have defied not the pearl buyers, but the whole structure, the whole way of life, and I am afraid for you. What have I to fear but starvation? Kino asked. But Juan Tomas shook his head slowly. That we must all fear. But suppose you are correct. Suppose your pearl is of great value. Do you think then the game is over? What do you mean? I don't know, said Juan Tomas, but I am afraid for you. It is new ground you are walking on. You do not know the way. I will go soon, said Kino. Yes, Juan Tomas agreed. That you must do. But I wonder if you will find it any different in the capital. Here you have friends and me, your brother. There you'll have no one." "What can I do?" Kino cried. "Some deep outrage is here. My son must have a chance. That is what they are striking at. My friends will protect me." "Only so long as they are not in danger or discomfort from it," said Juan Tomas. He arose, saying, "Go with God." And Kino said, "Go with God," and did not even look up, for the words had a strange chill in them. Long after Juan Tomas had gone, Kino sat brooding on his sleeping mat. A lethargy had settled on him, and a little gray hopelessness. Every road seemed blocked against him. In his head he heard only the dark music of the enemy. His senses were burningly alive, but his mind went back to the deep participation with all things, the gift he had from his people. He heard every little sound of the gathering night, the sleepy complaint of settling birds, the love agony of cats, the strike and withdrawal of little waves on the beach, and the simple hiss of distance. He could smell the sharp odor of exposed kelp from the receding tide. The little flare of the twig fire made the design on his sleeping mat jump before his entranced eyes. Juana watched him with worry. But she knew him, and she knew she could help him best by being silent and being near. And as though she too could hear the song of evil, she fought it, singing softly the melody of the family, of the safety and warmth and wholeness of the family. She held Coyotito in her arms and sang the whole song to him, to keep the evil out, and her voice was brave against the threat of the dark music. Kino did not move nor ask for his supper. She knew he would ask when he wanted it. His eyes were entranced, and he could sense the wary, watchful evil outside the brush house. He could feel the dark, creeping things waiting for him to go out into the night. It was shadowy and dreadful, and yet it called to him and threatened him and challenged him. His right hand went into his shirt and felt his knife. His eyes were wide. He stood up and walked to the doorway. Juana willed to stop him. She raised her hand to stop him, and her mouth opened with terror. For a long moment Kino looked out into the darkness, and then he stepped outside. Juana heard the little rush, the grunting struggle, the blow. She froze with terror for a moment, and then her lips drew back from her teeth like a cat's lips. She set Coyotito down on the ground. She seized a stone from the fireplace and rushed outside. But it was over by then. Kino lay on the ground, struggling to rise, and there was no one near him. Only the shadows and the strike and the rush of waves and the hiss of distance. But the evil was all about. Hidden behind the brush fence, crouched beside the house in the shadow, hovering in the air. Wanda dropped her stone, and she put her arms around Kino and helped him to his feet and supported him into the house. Blood oozed down from his scalp, and there was a long, deep cut in his cheek from ear to chin, a deep, bleeding slash. And Kino was only half conscious. He shook his head from side to side. His shirt was torn open and his clothes half pulled off. Juana sat him down on his sleeping mat, and she wiped the thickening blood from his face with her skirt. She brought him pulque to drink in a large pitcher, and he still shook his head to clear out the darkness. "Who?" Juana asked. "I don't know," Kino said. "I didn't see." Now Juana brought her clay pot of water, and she washed the cut on his face while he stared dazed ahead of him. "Kino, my husband," she cried, and his eyes stared past her. "Kino, can you hear me?" "I hear you," he said dully. "Kino, this pearl is evil. Let us destroy it before it destroys us. Let us crush it between two stones. Let us throw it back in the sea where it belongs. Kino, it is evil. It is evil." And as she spoke, the light came back in Kino's eyes, so that they glowed fiercely, and his muscles hardened, and his will hardened. "No," he said. "I will fight this thing. I will win over it. We will have our chance." His fist pounded the sleeping man. "No one shall take our good fortune from us," he said. His eyes softened then, and he raised a gentle hand to Wana's shoulder. "Believe me," he said, "I am a man." And his face grew crafty. "In the morning we will take our canoe, and we will go over the sea and over the mountains to the capital. You and I. We will not be cheated. I am a man." "Kino," she said huskily, "I am afraid. A man can be killed. Let us throw the pearl back into the sea." "Hush," he said fiercely. "I am a man. Hush." And she was silent, for his voice was command. "Let us sleep a little," he said. "In the first light we will start. You are not afraid to go with me?" "No, my husband." His eyes were soft and warm on her then. His hand touched her cheek. "Let us sleep a little," he said.